Well, hello there, book bestie. Welcome back to my channel, Wednesdays con Wilma. Thank you for stopping by. If you're new here, I am your book reader, reader of the room, reader of the person, and just all things reading and love to yap about it. So dale follow, dale share, dale like, and discuss with me as I am currently on the Debir Tirar Más book series. This week, we're going to be getting into War Against All Puerto Ricans. But before we do that, just make sure, are you subscribed? Are you sure? Are you sure that you're sure? Dale like, dale follow, dale subscribe y vamos a seguir para adelante. Gracias. Okay, War Against All Puerto Ricans. Whew, let's get into some story time. So, back in like 2018, I decided to apply to this nonprofit in Philadelphia, and they do a lot of training and development opportunities. And towards the end of that year, this particular group came and did a presentation and discussed like they are looking for professionals and paraprofessionals in the tri-state area. They're going to come together. They're going to do some professional development and then some like history and community engagement. And I was just like all for it because at the end of the course and at the end of the cohort, there is a trip to Puerto Rico. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. Mind you, this is right after Hurricane Maria. And I was looking for a way of how do I give back, right? How does little old me give back? So this particular agency was looking to do that. And I was like, I am all for it. So this particular agency is called the Latino Partnership Initiative, LPI, and you applied, you go through a round of interviews, and then you're picked for the cohort. And I little nervous on me because I was currently living in Jersey, looking to live in Philadelphia. I was working in Philadelphia, um, was just really trying to navigate and learn the city. And I wanted to give back. Like I said, Hurricane Maria had hit back in 2017. This is now 2018. So literally like a year and some change after. Um, and the premise of the entire trip was that you were going to do a service project for a space that was hardly hit by the hurricane. So I was like, sign me up, literally wanted to do that because I had been looking for ways to give back in my full capacity as just regular Joe Schmo citizen. So I believe it's about like a 10 month, no, more like well, the course all in itself, it was like 10 months with like from start to like graduation. But you like meet every Saturday and it was like a in service all day. You see all the people who they picked, and we had a pretty big cohort that year, mixed group individuals of like all different expertise, walks of life. And you kind of run it like a class president, secretary type of thing. Eventually you'll get into those positions, and your girl was class president or whatever. But you are voted by your peers, so I wasn't even like running. Like a friend of mine, coworker of mine who became a friend, like actually nominated me, and I was like, how dare you make me have more responsibility, but I will take it. I got to learn so much about the city that I was working in, partnerships that could be developed, resources, and I got closer to some folks that I had seen in passing, but was able to develop really good friendships with. So that particular cohort, um, myself and two other coworkers from my particular agency went. So we went in there, and it was like a really big, refreshing sense of like getting to know them more because again, you're just working side by side them, your peers, but you're getting to hear like perspectives. And I believe one particular one which just became like a lifelong friend for me. She's a diasporican, and then the other young lady was island born and then became part of the diaspora. And so getting to hear her experience was just like, wow, tell me more. And just getting to hear her experience like just made me gain like a new admiration for her. Like I said, like we've only worked with in passing with each other in the agency. There wasn't really a lot of overlay. So like to get to see this person and hear these folks' opinions really made me be like, wow, like y'all women are some badasses. All in all, we finally get our and you like fundraise. I forgot that part. You fundraise, you do a lot of like team building every Saturday. And we eventually go to Puerto Rico. So our particular community group was set in San Lorenzo. We were able to, and I'll post some pictures as well of what I have. We were able to like clean up this church. There was like a community staple in San Lorenzo that was hit really, really hard by Huracán Maria, and we were able to do that. But the best part of the trip was you got to see the island, and I don't want to say even as a tourist, but like so intimately. I, prior to 2019, had not been there since I was a child. My personal family dynamic, I went there to see my father's side of the family when I was like six-ish, seven-ish, and anytime he brought, well, anytime we met up with our family, he'd rather bring them over to the States than like go over there. So I'm sitting here and I'm in a stew of emotions. One, because I'm like, wow, right? You're seeing the parts of the island that was still hit from Hurricane Maria. And then, like, for me, there was like an internal space of, I felt so robbed of not being connected to my culture because being in the diaspora and like having my family be responsible for that connection back and forth. Um, was kind of lost. So now me as an adult, I'm like, I would have loved to have been able to come back to the island and know more and been more connected. So now as an adult, I make sure to visit the island at least like every other year. And I've been able to go back in 2021 and in 2023, I believe. And I'm going back again this year for the Debir Tirar Más photos tour, which I'm just like, that was God's alignment for me to get a ticket. But all in all, it like brought up all these emotions. The best part of the trip was we did not stay in San Juan. San Juan was one of the stops, but we literally saw the island. We stayed in Orocovis, which is like in the middle of the island, and we hit so many principal parts. During that time was also like a crazy, like phenomenal time to be on because the island was protesting Rosello, which is the governor at the time, and there was like all these manifestations going along around the country, and you're being able to see that. And unfortunately, we weren't able to participate with the protest, but we were able to be around it. Unfortunately, because we were under like the agency's like insurance and just in case something happened, but we were there with the folks ready and on their side to renunciar al Reiki. So that was like also like being there during such a pivotal moment in history for the island was like also a array of emotions. I also was able to see where my mom's from. So she's from Ponce, my father's from Yabucoa, and being able to walk. Oh, I'm gonna gather myself. But being able to walk the same plazas that she used to walk in, go into the stores that she used to, made this like connection to her so more. My mom left the island when she was 21. She was the last one of her siblings to come to the States, and she hadn't been back in like over 20 some odd years. So being able to call her and be like, "Oh, mom, I went, to La Plaza de las Delicias, or I was at the Parque de Bomba, which is like the uh, firefighters museum, or like I ate ice cream at the ice cream parlor, or I went to La Gloria, which is like this like shoe store that she used to always talk about, and like had that connection with her. Um, Felt so amazing, and I was so grateful that this experience was able to give that to me. I was also able to go to Loisa. We did a bomba class in Loisa and La Plaza, and like, oh my gosh, like just being able again that connection to the culture really sparked this major love and affirmation to my culture. I have always been super proud to be Puerto Rican, but this gave me like like ignition, like lighting fluid. Like it was like if I was like pro Bodhi before, I was like on 1,000 afterwards. So I will forever be grateful to that experience. And I believe they still do cohorts. So if you know anyone, if you're interested, if you're in the tri-state area, it's Latino Partnership Initiative. They, like I said, like this was such a great and transformative experience for me. And it's how I came into the possession of this book. they assigned it. This was like our major homework. We were to read it and we were to discuss um, through different like in-service trainings. And when I read it, I was introduced to a lot of information that I did not know. Again, I live in the States, so the States' history is going to take precedent over their territory and colony. You're going to learn about George Washington. You're not going to learn about what Puerto Ricans were doing on the island. So this was like a really big gateway for me as to how the US came in control of Puerto Rico and a lot of the atrocities and tactics that they have held over the island. So if you see me switching over, I'm on my handy dandy laptop and getting into my notes. So, an overview. War Against All Puerto Ricans, Revolution and Terror in Americans Colony is the full name of the book by Nelson A. Dennis. It was released in 20. The book was released in 2015 and it examines the work of the U.S. colonial rule over Puerto Rico, focusing particularly on the national movement of the mid 20th century and the life of Pedro Albizu Campos, Harvard educated leader of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party. It focused on details of like the repression, surveillance, violent suppression of the independence movements by U.S. forces and authorities. And it just brings to light so many things. Like I said, it's really heavy, a lot of the conversations that this book aligns to. So again, rereading it now, it was really, really hard. There was a lot of anger just feeling and spewing up because especially our political climate in this space, it was just like, like there was just, it was really hard to get through again. It was hard the first time, but I think that what made it easier was the discussions that the LPI fostered to like kind of like talk over these things. So rereading it on its own, technically for like entertainment slash education, hit just different accords in this space. So where does the title come from? Because it's a very like attention grabber. The title's origin refers to when U.S. Police Chief E. Francis Riggs in the 1930s, who said the U.S. was prepared for a war against all Puerto Ricans, and it kind of sets the tone for the book's depiction of like the systemic colonial violence and repression. And so it is that attention grabber on purpose. Um, Colonial relationships are not, sweet and cute. Like it is done in very malicious and undertones, not, excuse me, overtones and tactics that the person in charge or the entity in charge is going to go aggressively. So it discussed a lot of things. The book is broken into different parts, particularly how it gets in there. We're gonna go into the conversation of like the way it's written because it's written very heavily with the authors, like where the author stands in the conversation, but it's broken into the first 9 chapters go under the title Facts. The second section of the book is People, and then Events. So it's in 3 parts: Facts, People, Events. When we talk about Pedro Albizu Campos in the book, um, it humanizes him a lot. It dramatizes a lot of his experience, but it definitely lends to like the brilliance of who he was. And then, unfortunately, we talk about his ultimate persecution, his imprisonment, and his torture. He was exposed to radiation, allegedly, and unwavering resistance within all of the things against him. We also go into the Ponce massacre that happened in 1937 and one, how it came to be, and two, the covering up of it. It was a peaceful independence march turned deadly when police opened fire on unarmed civilians, killing 19 and wounding over 200. The way Dennis describes this event in the book, it's like firsthand accounts. Um, um, about the chaos and using like eyewitness accounts that are chilling and poignant. One of the biggest like takeaways for me when reading the book and discussing like the Puerto Rican nationalist movement was the way that they like trained. They kind of like trained wherever they could and they didn't have access to arms. So they would like train with sticks. And that is a big image that we see in Bad Bunny's La Mudanza. You see that when the Puerto Rican civilians are in the light blue not costumes, but clothing, right? Militia, where they're holding like la escopeta, like the guns, but they're tree branches, and that's exactly how the independence movement would train. They would train with whatever they had, sticks or whatever, just to like kind of be prepared. So that was like a big like whoa, calling back. Dennis also discusses a lot about the use of FBI surveillance files, dossiers, and we know this also by the COINTELPRO movement within the civil rights. So same tactics, right? Um, discuss like declassified FBI documents exposing the death of the U.S. surveillance infiltration from Puerto Rican activist citizens who were labeled subversives by simply promoting Puerto Rican culture. When I remember reading the book the first time, this is the first time I was ever exposed to knowing that there was like a gag order when the US came, like not being able to like raise the flag, not be able to sing patriotic song. So again, back to that Bad Bunny lyric, like, I'm gonna carry this with me because at one point we couldn't, which is a pretty much translation of his lyric. Dennis also discusses a lot about the use of FBI surveillance files, dossiers, and we know this also by the COINTELPRO movement within the civil rights. So same tactics, right? Um, discuss like declassified FBI documents exposing the death of the U.S. surveillance infiltration from Puerto Rican activist citizens who were labeled subversives by simply promoting Puerto Rican culture. When I remember reading the book the first time, this is the first time I was ever exposed to knowing that there was like a gag order when the US came, like not being able to like raise the flag, not be able to sing patriotic song. So again, back to that Bad Bunny lyric, like, I'm gonna carry this with me because at one point we couldn't, which is a pretty much translation of his lyric. I believe the lyric is like, aquí mataron gente por sacar la bandera, por eso es que ahora la llevo donde quiera. So like, people was taken out and killed for carrying this flag, so I'm gonna carry it wherever I go. Which, if you know a Puerto Rican, we show off that flag, baby. We show off that flag, and when you recognize that in our history it was against the law to do so, so now that we can, it's that reclaiming of this is our culture, and we're gonna wear it proudly. Dennis also writes heavily about the economic exploitation of the island. I think this is where, outside of like the atrocities of like what was sanctioned by the state, it was the devastating forces of what once Puerto Rico was to where it's and where it can be, because that's another thing. So it can be this way, but it traces like the U.S. sugar barons, the corporations and policies that impoverished the island while enriching outsider investors. And it's like, this is what's happening now, right? It's now happening under gentrification with like pushing citizens out, outpricing them, buying things up, land. Um, it was just so hard. It was just really, really hard to bear witness to that and recognize that like this is happening again, right, in a different way. Um, the way that they pretty much like messed up with the agriculture. Like Puerto Rico was booming with coffee, sugar, pineapple, um, was just one of these major like booming industries to like where now there isn't even much agriculture happening now. There is a resurgence of this on the island by the people because the people are resilient as fuck. But it goes into the sinisterness of what it is to be a colony, right? Like the extraction of your goods, the not say so. Like even now, like Puerto Rico has a governor, but the governor doesn't have much say so over the island when it comes to DC. Like the governor talks to DC in hopes that their proposals are picked up, but like they're not really the main. They're like, if America doesn't want to deal with Puerto Rico, they can. You have things like La Promesa, you have things like La Junta, which is this board that isn't even voted for, but assigned, and for all of the fiduciary things, it just, which leads to a lot of the corruption in the current governor, which We go all of this in my podcast. So, a little shameless plug, go over there. We got like 12 episodes. We break down the political parties on the island. So please give it a listen. As always, we'll always plug Boricua Culture Mix Pod with my co-host Diane. Hey girl. But it was, like I said before, it was really hard to sit with like, here is the cycle again when it comes to the island. And you have folks that are trying their absolute hardest. You have amazing nonprofits on the island, like Comedores Sociales, which is like doing a lot of great work with ensuring that um, food insecurity is being helped. They're also having like co-ops. They're also working with the agriculture. You have Casa Pueblo, which is this amazing agency in Ajuntas where they are on renewable energies. They've been on renewable energies, and during Hurricane Maria, they were the ones that were powering a lot of things for the folks in our juntas. Like folks were able to bring like their medicines that need to be refrigerated because they work on renewable solar energies. They also do a lot of environmental work. So just you have this resilience as always on the island. So like I discussed, this book did not come out without any controversy. And it was mostly due to a lot of the writing style of Dennis. Nelson. We're going to go in some strengths and some weaknesses. Um, it was engaging, and it was like very narrative driven. The author uses a lot of storytelling techniques to make complex historical events like accessible and like emotional resonant. Vivid language. Prose is often intense, almost cinematic. Like I could see how he would like be setting up these historical accounts, and like the humanization of folks. And it amplifies this sense of the injustice and the urgency and like this personal tone. Like I said, you do not get lost on where Nelson falls into his beliefs, right? His tone and his passion and his unapologeticness, it aligns throughout the book and the political messages. So we talked about some of its strengths. Let's get into some of the weaknesses from the book. The subjectivity. A lot of critics noted that the book can feel like kind of like poematic. Dennis does not hide his ideological stance. Some of it can kind of like compromise it to a scholarly neutrality. Again, if you're trying to be a historian, historians are based on facts, right? I know that you might feel some type of way, which makes sense when you're like close to it. But if you're going to present facts and historical facts, it has to be this is what it was, this is how it is, yada yada. So that was a lot of like weakness in the book or lack of citations. A lot of historians argued that the book lacked like rigorous academic sourcing. He heavily relied on a lot of declassified documents or firsthand accounts, but doesn't always trace those back to like the primary sources with citations and precision. And of course, the dramatization of it all. There are times when I was reading the book, it felt like, well, damn, Nelson, was you there? Like, you really telling this like you was there personally back in like 1932. And that flair can kind of like divulge the line of like sensationalism, and it limits that persevere. It can limit the credibility and the academic standing. So that's kind of like where the book had it. And then there were some other additional controversies. Um, Again, amongst historians, a lot of scholars criticize it for like lacking academic rigor, for what they saw was overly simplified portrayals of complex historical dynamics. Um, in Puerto Rico and diaspora, the book stirred intense emotions. Many readers, especially Puerto Ricans, praised it for shedding light on a history that had been deliberately hidden or downplayed in the U.S. education systems. And then, of course, it's super politically charged. You do not mince questions as to where Nelson lands, and then of course, it doesn't paint the U.S. in a great light, but also the U.S. didn't do a lot of great things to be painted in the best of light in these specific situations, and then um, it further divides where you're at. So if you're Puerto Rican for statehood, you're going to see this book and be like, no, we need America. But if you're pro independence, this will reignite or continue to fuel what already is your thoughts in alignment with that movement. I purposely gravitated for this to be the first book in the series because I think it does a really good job of doing the trampoline to the next source, right? To getting some more information, because this book is so heavily charged with a lot of personal feelings. It's good to go to the next scholarly document or and things of that nature. So it's provocative for sure. It does give shed light on real important information. Like, we talked about Ponce massacre. It generated so much information for me, especially like not knowing about La Operacion, where they sterilized 1/3 of the women on the island. They were not informing women of their consent, and just performing hysterectomies left and right, like just literally just performing eugenics all over the island. And again, history repeating itself, where we have this person who is supposed to be on top of our medical. Our light just went out. Se fue la luz. So we have all of this in a cycle, right? And it definitely it just it's like there's never ending. It can feel a little bit of like hopeless in a way, but I here to say, do not feel hopeless, do not feel downtrodden, have that resilience, tap into it. um, Again, my pod, we do a really good job of putting on stateside and island wide agencies that we can connect to get some good assistance, and like, how do I help? So I do recommend War Against All Puerto Ricans, like I said, as a starter point, and as a means of like, you're gonna know that you're gonna build off of this knowledge, right? You're gonna go and do some more additional research for yourself, but it is a good starter point for the series and for yourself if you want to know about Puerto Rican history. Um, Definitely, it is a lot. You're gonna sit with a lot. You're gonna have to like really be like, shit, like this is heavy, bro. It's a lot. It is a lot. And I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but it is so much to take in. I definitely sat, did notes, looked up additional information. And because I do have a history of Puerto Rico on the list, it was a really good springboard to that. So I cannot wait to get into that. And then we'll see where the series goes. But this was War Against All Puerto Rico, War Against All Puerto Ricans. It is the first of the series. Continue watching if you're interested. And thank you again for spending some of your Wednesday con Wilma. Continue to read what entertains you, and you will always be entertained. Gracias por todo. Dale like, dale follow, dale share, comentar. Let me know what piqued your interest if you've read the book in the comments. And overall, follow me on Instagram, TikTok. Follow my pod, Boricua Culture Mix. We drop every Tuesday, so like, please continue. Like I said, 12 episodes. Sigue pa'lante. Nos vemos the next week. Bye. Ciao. Besitos.